I've got something I want to share with you. I started sharing a couple of weeks ago. The word the Lord gave was, well, let's turn there from Hebrews 11:36. Hebrews 11:36. Oh, sorry, Hebrews 10:36. That would just excite the people on the screens. Hebrews 10:36 says, "For you have need of endurance." And we talked a couple of weeks ago about the fact that it doesn't say it'd be nice to add and it would be good to have. It says you need endurance. And we talked about how people sometimes misuse that word need and use it in the way of it'd be nice, but you can compensate with other things. You know, you need this, but if you don't have it, then you can use something else. And people who are really good at cooking can do that. They say, I need this ingredient, but they look and they say, we don't have that ingredient. They say, well, we can use this instead, or we can use this, or we can compensate by this. Or I don't have a dessert. Well, it doesn't matter. I don't need it as such because I will make such an amazing main course. People will forget there was no dessert. I just keep feeding them savory food until they're so full they don't realize we haven't got a dessert for them. So you can sort of say the word need, well, it doesn't need. But in the same way as you say an aeroplane needs a right wing and a left wing, not talking about politics, right wing and a left wing, you need them. And you cannot have a right wing that is so powerful that then you don't have to have the left wing. You don't have the left wing that is so amazing that we can just chop the right wing off. No, they're both needed because even though they look the same, they're actually accomplishing different things on each side. One can't do the work of the other. And you need faith and patience or endurance or perseverance. You need it. You need it. Turn to the person next to you and say, you need it. Plead with them. You need it. It's not just a good idea. You need it. It's not just going to be nice. You need it. But, the trouble is if sometimes people, you give them one thing and you say, you need this. Oh, yes. And then they embrace that. And you say, well, all I need is this side. No, you need both. You can't get it done by endurance without faith. You can't get your faith done without endurance. So I said I'd explain a little bit more about how patience works so you can understand why it's needed and how to use it and how to train it and how to equip yourself with patience. Because you cannot have enough faith to get the job done. There will come times when you must have this ability called endurance or perseverance or patience. I'm thinking of the scripture in Galatians chapter 6. Let me just turn there. Galatians 6. And verse 9. Well, let's read from verse 8 first of all. The one who sows to his own flesh shall from the flesh reap corruption, but the one who sows to the Spirit shall from the Spirit reap eternal life. If you sow to the Spirit, you will reap from the Spirit. And sometimes that's where we stop. We sort of say, okay, yeah, if I sow, I will reap. If I just look at this process, all I need to do is make sure I'm sowing in the Spirit and I will reap from the Spirit. So it says, yes, you will reap of the Spirit, but then it just has verse 9, and let us not lose heart in doing good, for in due time we shall reap if we do not grow weary. So yes, you will reap in due time. And, there's sometimes we don't like the old due time. We like to do it now. Let now be the time. And this is why we need faith, because there's a due time, a needed time, a time for that miracle. And yet God is really big. There's a word that is really strong on his heart, which is the word today. Today is the day of salvation. Today is the day. Book of Hebrews talks about how today is a key word from the Lord. So he says, I know there's a due time, but you've got to believe for it today. And you say, Lord, if I'm believing for a due time, isn't that tomorrow? The Lord said, no, you've got to make that due time become today. Because otherwise, the danger is due time just becomes future time, sometime in the future. And I'm just persevering and holding on, and I'm strong in my faith, but I'm just letting, and what I've actually become is just strong in endurance. But my faith is, well, sometime it will happen. And we've got to have faith for today, but not grow weary waiting for the due time. And so without both of them working together, you will find that any promise that God gives you or anything that you are working towards in the things of God, you will struggle with if you think I can just release faith, I can pray a prayer, I can say what I need to say, and that from that moment it is done. Yes, there's a sense where it's finished, it's accomplished, but you've got to then hold on. It says, if you do not grow weary. If you do not grow weary, then you will reap. If you do not grow weary. So we've got to tie those two together. So the word that the Bible, I love studying the Bible in as much as possible in the original language. I find it, for me personally, it just opens my understanding. And let me say this: I understand. It's not because the Greek in the New Testament is some sort of magical special language. When I first started studying it, I would almost treat it like a magic sort of word. And I'd go in there and I'd just try and pull things out and as if there's special truths in there. And it's not. It's not like it's like a magical language. It's not a special language. It was just common Greek for the time. It was how they wrote in a lot of other documents, not just Bible documents. But my understanding of language generally has increased, or I understand words are only as powerful as the concept that you share. If I say a word to you and you do not understand the concept, then it's nothing. So if I begin to speak to you in another language, Paul says it's like, if I'm calling the warning sound in a battle, but if you don't know what that means, it's useless. You've got to be able to understand the language. But even if you understand English, how many know that the language changes and people use things and phrases? I might understand the words, but I can't understand the context they're using it in. I was reading this week about someone who created one of the first dictionaries, which was convict speak. Basically, what convicts would speak in Australia, and it was written by a convict who was a huge con man. He actually got charged, I think, 3 times. Getting released, get caught, released, caught. He was a bad guy. He just couldn't stop doing things. Got married, and then together they were convicts. But anyway, he got caught and he was sent up to Newcastle. This is early days, early 1800s, I think. So and Newcastle was a coal mine, and he was like he's a white collar criminal. So to be in a coal mine was not his place. He hated it, and he had this idea. He would write a dictionary of the convict phrases and words. Because what's happening is that the magistrate, the person who was in charge of the area of Newcastle, would have these convicts come in, and then you have to listen and make decisions, and they'd be up for charges of doing things around. And the convicts would speak, and the magistrate couldn't understand what they were talking about because they'd use all these little phrases and little quirky little sayings that were common amongst the convicts, but he couldn't understand them, and he'd get confused. And he'd get frustrated. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? And so this guy thought, if I write a dictionary for him of all these phrases, I'll get on his good side, and he will get me to come in and work in an administration rather than in the coal mine. So that was his whole motivation. But they took that, and they actually was sent to England, and it was published as a book. And from that, we have an understanding of the type of language that the convicts used. And in Australia, some of our phrases are still using convict language. It's nowhere else around. So when you talk about in Australia, so I'm going to put my togs on, what are we talking about? Swimming bathers, all right? That came from a phrase, togs meant clothes. And guess what? That was from the convicts talking about their togs. So it's convict talk when you're talking about your togs. But, or bathers if you're in Queensland, or, I know even in the different parts of Australia, we use different phrases and things like that. But isn't interesting? I said to someone, get your togs on. You're like, I got no idea what you mean. Well, that's an English word, sort of. But what about other words that have taken different meanings? Like if I give Jordan something and he said, well, that's wicked. Well, I thought it would be good. No, I said, no, I mean, it's really sick. I'm really sorry, Jordan. I was trying to buy you something that would make you happy. And I've just given you something that's wicked and sick. And how many know that nowadays that means the exact opposite of what it should mean? And words have just become used in so many ways. Like if someone says, that's awesome. So if I told someone, oh, we did something that was awesome, they would think, oh, some great, mighty thing. No, awesome just mean, I found the ribbon for my hair the right color. It's awesome. That's not awesome. That's just good. That's nice. So we use words. And so what you need to do is understand that words must convey something. And if you don't understand what they're conveying, then you're in difficulty. But words, I've come to understand, are more pictures of something. You get an understanding of something. And so I see them not as a string of letters, but I see them as a concept, as a picture, as something. And then when you're translating something from one language to the other, you're trying to take that picture and find something in the language that it's going to match. And say, what do they have? And so there's one of the things in the Bible, there's two words when we talk about this need for patience, that there's actually two different words and often translated as patience. And the rules for it tend to be all over the place. And I was reading a Greek dictionary, and it says no wonder people are confused, because we've confused them by translating these two words the same way, but then saying they've got two different concepts. And you just have to try and work it out. And so it includes perseverance and endurance and patience. So that's why those words are often interspersed. So I want to tell you, because normally we wouldn't have to go this deep and we'd say, oh, I don't have to learn the Greek. But you need to know not the words, but the pictures that they represent. And you can use your own words then. I will explain the pictures, and you can just find your own words to understand it. But the reason you need to know these two pictures, they work together. You need to take them and match them with your faith if you're going to get the job done. You cannot get your faith to get through without these two things working with you. And the trouble is, they've often used the English word patience. So you need faith and patience. Hebrews 6 talks about, let's look at the example of Abraham and others, and said, and they, by their faith and patience, they obtained the promises. And here in the verse that we were just talking about, Hebrews chapter 10, verse 36, you need of, and in New American says endurance, and some version, you need patience. So once you have done the will of God, you may receive what was promised. So you need these two things. Now, one of the difficulties is that we use this English word patience, but when I say the English word patience, it can conjure up so many different things in your mind. What's your picture of this word patience? In fact, my picture of the word patience was shaped by a video our kids used to watch continuously. That's a nice word. Anyone ever had a video that the kids love and they just watch it and watch it? They've got this, children have this ability for repetition, don't they? They just love, Levi our little grandson came to me yesterday, and he banged my leg, and I went, oh, and he thought that was so funny. And an hour later, oh, isn't this getting old for you? You sort of know what's going to happen. We're just doing the same thing over and over and over and over. But it's like the first time for them. So let's put that video on that I haven't seen since it finished just now. Put it on again, because I'm going to watch it as if it's the first time. And so they had a video based on the fruit of the Spirit, which is a good thing. So I'm glad for what they were watching. I'm glad that we were at least getting good stuff. And they would take all the different fruit of the Spirit and they would explain them. They had a song about patience, explaining what patience was. Does anyone know the song? Does anyone recommend? Yeah, Christine does, yeah. And it was Herbert the Snail sang a song about patience, because Herbert used to go on a skateboard, a snail on a skateboard, and he'd race around and knock all the other snails over, and he'd knock everything down. And an old snail had to take Herbert to the side, because Herbert was always racing around, and he would say, and he had these words, I'm not doing it for you, because I can't. The grandpa snail goes, have patience, like a snail singing. Can you imagine how infuriating? Have patience, have patience, don't be in such a hurry. Like, oh man, we just watched this 10 minutes ago and we're watching it again and again and again. I have no patience for this song. It's almost like it's speaking to me. So patience, we were told, is the opposite of patience is being in a hurry. If you're in a hurry running around, patience is just to be slow and steady, like a snail. So that would tell me, if I just took that understanding, that picture. So the English there has painted a picture. Patience is slow and steady. So when I read, I need to mix my faith with patience. I'm mixing it with Grandpa Snail and taking my faith and making my faith go slow and steady. So I need to have slow and steady faith to get it done. And it's like, but the trouble is, the two Greek words, the pictures are nothing like that. They're not snails or anything. They're not even sloths. They're not turtles. They're just nothing to do with animals. It's a different concept. The two pictures that we're meant to tie together with faith is not that. So the danger is that Christians can be saying, I need to get my faith to work. Why isn't my faith working? It's because I've only got one wing on my plane, and I can't work out why I can't get off the ground. And I say, you need this, you need patience. And you go, oh, okay, slow and steady. Well, I'll tell you what, slow and steady does not get a plane off the ground. The whole purpose of taking off is to go fast and quick. Get it up. And so it's like slow and steady. I'll try and add the slow and steady to my faith. And so all I do is slow my faith down. All I try and do is put dampers on my faith. All I'm trying to do is stop expecting so much. Pull my expectations back. And that's not helping faith. That's killing faith. That's destroying my faith. So the danger is if I tell you, add to your faith patience, and you put the wrong thing on, you'll actually kill it, not help it. And you say, well, what did you achieve in the last 30 years? Nothing, but I'm still walking in patience. Oh no, I've killed your faith and made you happy about it. I've told you this is good. That is not. So I'm going to give you the two pictures from the Greek words. I can tell you the Greek words so you've got something to hang them on, but after that you can forget the Greek words. All I want you to do is get the pictures. All right? Because these two words you need to mix together with your faith. And in order to get that done. And it's right throughout the book of Hebrews, which is all about getting forward. And Hebrews 11, 1. In fact, let's go to Hebrews 12, verse 1, just so we can see. This is where it's heading to. This is what you're going to be able to do with it. Hebrews 12, verse 1 says, therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses, it's talking about all the great men and women of God that have gone ahead before us, who have lived out their faith. They're not snails. They're not slow. They endured to the end, but they got things done. You know, Noah built an ark. They put armies to flight. David killed giants. I tell you what, he didn't go, have patience, have patience. No, that sling was going fast. That stone was, it says that David collected the stones when he was facing Goliath, and then it says he ran up to the battle. That's not patient. Patience was working in David in his faith. And so, therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us also lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with patience or with endurance the race that is set before us. We are going to run, and we are going to do it with this thing called endurance or patience. In this one, it's hupomeno. Two Greek words, hupomeno and macrothumio. I had to stop and think for a second, because macrothumio and hupomeno, the two types of patience. All right, so let's just talk about what these word pictures mean. Let's start with macrothumio. Okay, in Hebrews 6, when it says these men of God but mixed together their faith and their patience, guess what? Macrothumio is what they mix together with. In Hebrews 12, it's using the other word. So that's why I say they often look like it's exactly the same word. It's not. Macrothumio. Macro. And that's what we use that in English. Anyone know what macro means? Anyone know what micro means? Micro is little. Microscope. Microscopic. Very little. Macro is the opposite of micro. So what's macro? Big. So if you're looking at the macro version, you're looking at the big version, the big picture. Macro is just the Greek word for big. Micro is the word for little. Macro, thumio. Thumio talks about your innards, your soul, your thoughts, your emotions. It becomes your feelings, your soul, your anger, your rage. It's anger, but well beyond anger, to explosive rage. Anyone ever, like rage? Like, I can be angry. I'm very angry with you. But when you talk about rage, it's different. And this thumio is it's coming from my very belly. Do you know what I mean? Me, I'm just full of rage. You think, how does this patience? But we put the macro in front. Think of it this way. Think of short fuse. Anyone know someone who's short fuse? No pointing. You can just put your hand up if you know someone. I didn't say point them out. I'm sitting next to one. Short fused. You should see them behind the wheel of a car. No, I'm not asking that. Short fused means that the thumio comes out easily. They're quick to explode. Macro thumio is long fused. Think of it like that. They've got a long, they don't, that explosion doesn't come out quickly. It takes it's patient. Doesn't explode. So something happens, they bang, there's, no. They're not likely, and they will not explode. They will not react quickly into a situation. They will hold their tongue. They will hold their feelings. They will hold their thoughts. They will be careful how they respond. So they do not let the frustrations that they're facing cause them to react in a way that is against their faith. Because when you're standing in faith and then you have a frustrating situation, there is a temptation to let the frustration drive you and overflow, and you say, I will never see this happen. God never comes through when I'm praying. My family will never change. I'm always doing this. I'm just an absolute idiot. I can never do it right. That's microthumio. You've just let it all out. No filter. Microthumia means no filter. Just if you feel it, say it. I've just got to be truthful to myself. No, sometimes you've not got to be truthful to yourself. You've got to shut your mouth and your mind, and you've got to be macrothumia, which says, I don't just take what I feel and give it vent. There's a scripture in Proverbs 29. I think it's verse 11. Don't worry about getting the verse for it, because I'll read it to you from some of the other translations. Proverbs 29 verse 11 says, basically it says, a fool vents all his feelings. This is New King James. A fool vents all his feelings, but a wise man holds them back. Passion Translation, you can recognize fools by the way they give full vent to their rage and let their words fly. But the wise bite their tongue and hold back all they could say. And you're like, now think about that. How does that help your faith? How does that type of character trait help your faith? Your faith needs you to not just let the pressure you're under or the situation you're facing or the frustration in that this has taken too long, and if you just vent it, you undo your faith. Your faith needs you to be macrothumio. No, slow up, don't let that happen. And in that time, rather than just vent, there is something you need to do. I'll talk about that in a minute. There's an alternative to how you've got to strengthen these things. All right, so macrothumio means I do not allow the frustrations. Now, normally, and this is how the Greek word works, this word normally is talking about not the frustrations of the circumstances, but it's normally to do with people. It's frustrations. This word is most often used when dealing personal relationships. So I'm just skipping that because it doesn't apply in your life, because the people in your life are wonderful and cause you no frustration, and you never, ever, ever would think of microthumio with those around you. Your people are perfect. But in case you know a friend who has someone in their life who causes them frustration, this is how it's actually frustration in getting faith working in an imperfect world. So this is not just about my faith is being held back by the devil and time and circumstances. This is trying to live right. And I don't know whether it's hard to be the only perfect person in a room with perfect faith and and then there's people all around that just are not getting the job done. But you know what? You're possibly one of the ones in there with them. This Bible does not talk about how to live a life where everyone's perfect and everyone's on board and everything's happening right. You will face, if you're going to get your faith to the end goal, you've got to do it through being in circumstances where it's tough going at times, and it's frustrating, and it's hard, and it's working against you. And there's people that confuse you, and people that hurt you, and people that say negative things. But you've got to be in that situation macrothumio, not respond, not get sucked into them, not be caught up in what they're saying and respond, not just let it all hang out. You've got to keep yourself according to the word that your faith is saying. Now, we'll go back to that in a minute. Let's look at the other word, hupomeno. So that's macrothumio. So a number of verses talking about patience, we'll be using that verse. Sometimes there's verses that use both together. I think there's there's a few. There's about 3 or 4 times where Paul says I have macrothumio and I have hupomeno. I have both. That just makes the translators' heads pop because they're trying to. I've got patience and patience, so they've got to try and work out which one to use for each of them. So hupomeno, 2 different words, hupo and meno, over or under, over under. Basically, it means, meno means place or a path. I like to think of it not just as a single location, but there's a path for you. Hupo means to stay under that path and stay on track. So hupomeno means that I don't get pressured to go off track. I don't lose this. Now, the pressure can come as a squeezing pressure or as an inviting pressure. So imagine you're in a race. A lot of these things have the concept. Hebrews 12 talks about a race. So you're running a race and you're doing really well. Imagine you're running through the Dandenongs. It's a marathon. Sometimes we treat the race that we're in as if it's a sprint, but it's actually a marathon. It's a long race. It's not you can't just get there and get done. You've got to get through. And so you're going through the Dandenongs and you're heading up and it's getting hard work and it's getting hot and you look down and there's some steps going down to a little hut next to a little creek and you're like, wow, what am I on this path for when there's that path? Why would I stay on this path? So there's pressure from the heat. There's pressure from the incline. There's pressure from my legs screaming, take a rest. There's pressure. And then there's a drawing. Come to us down here where you can stop and rest. And there's a nice easy path. There's an easier way to do this. Timothy talks about the fact that we've got to learn lessons, from a soldier, from a farmer, from a runner, an athlete. And he said the athlete only gets the prize if he what? Competes according to the rules. There is pathways that get you to the right endpoint, but not to the prize, because you've broken what God has told you. There is something called compromise, where people try and get what God is trying to get them to, but they do it in the flesh. Remember, the devil came to Jesus and he said, Jesus, I'll show you all the wonders of the world. He said, you can have them right now. You don't have to do this cross thing. He didn't say this, but this is what it implied. Don't worry about the path that God's got for you. Because that path is going up to a cross and you're going to hang on a cross. He said, I'll tell you what, I'll just give you everything now. You can have it all now. I'll just hand it over now. All you have to do is come off the path and bow before me. All you have to do is take a different heart attitude and just sell out to me, and I'll give it to you. Jesus needed hupomeno. No, I'm not moving from what God is. He said, you worship only the Lord your God. That's what I do. Hupomeno is so that's what he was exercising at that moment. Anytime there's pressure to move sideways, anytime there's pressure to draw you off or take a cheap, quick cut, you can get it. You're under pressure. I remember years ago, first down in Melbourne, so I was young, I was possibly even still a teenager, maybe about 20, before I was dating Christine, I think. So this is really early on in the days, really early. And we were down, and I was going to the youth, at what Breakthrough was back then, Blackburn. Christine was the youth. Her brother Bruce was the youth pastor, and I was there. But I was just going to the youth. But I was a part of it and enjoying it, loving it. And we would go out doing witnessing at the roller skating rink at Bayswater. All places we'd come out here to do witnessing. And one time I was there, and there was a guy who was doing the DJ sort of thing, doing the music. And I was talking to him, and he was like, hey, you guys are pretty good talking and stuff like that. You wouldn't mind like a job, would you? And he's talking to someone who was, financially challenged, teenager, not living with my parents, low income. Hey, here's some money. If you come, what do I have to do? You get up here and you play some songs. You can play some Christian stuff. Wow, that's good. When is it? Saturday nights, because he's, what it was is he'd made a commitment, but he wanted to break the commitment, so he was trying to get someone in to do it. And it was like money, 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 easy job, da-da-da-da. Only trouble was it conflicted with my involvement with the youth group. That met on Saturday night. But there was a temptation there. Money, 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 easy job, some quick rewards. But something in my heart didn't sit right. Something in my heart said, that's not your path. But it's money, money, money. It's not what's on my heart. I wasn't a leader. I wasn't in a position where I couldn't. But I just really felt, what? If I'm going to do this, I do it, We have a phrase, if you're going to be a bear, be a grizzly. If you're going to come to church, come to church. If you're going to be a Christian, be a Christian. Do it. If I'm going to do something, do it with. And this would have been a compromise. It would have been, And in the end, I said no. Not knowing that eventually I would be asked to be the youth leader. And if I wasn't there to be asked to be the youth leader, I doubt I ever would have been asked to be the pastor. But when I was at that moment, standing outside that DJ's little booth and he was making that, I didn't realize what was at stake. I didn't realize all that. But if I chose this path, then it's a different path. And you don't get the prizes of what you have ahead of you. Pressure. So that's a pull pressure. Or it's a pressure, don't say that, or don't do that, or don't be that. Romans 12:1 and 2 talks about, Romans 12:2 says, do not be conformed by this world. Do not be squeezed by the pressures of this world. This world wants us to behave a certain way. And there's a pressure to fit in. Everyone else is going. Imagine you're going on that path and you're in a bunch of runners and you get up there and suddenly, there's 12 of you and you're running and 11 of you all take this easy down the steps. You say, oh, they say, come on, don't go up there. Come down here. Don't be an idiot. Don't do that. This is the right way. This is a much better path. The world is trying to shape us and tell us how to be really successful Christians at the moment, that they have a pattern for us. A good Christian is very inclusive. A very good Christian is, and they tell us what's the Bible. I've had conversations with people say, Jesus said, and I'm like, he did not actually say that. You're just imagining it. You don't even know what he actually said. I've heard ministers, not from our, say, Jesus, Jesus never even said that. But there's a pressure. Do what the world's saying. In 1 Corinthians, I think it's chapter 1, it says, the Greeks and the Jews both could not stand the cross. The cross to them was offensive. It's upsetting. They say, give us a Jesus, but can we do it without the cross? I want a crossless gospel message. And Paul said, I preach nothing except Jesus and him crucified. If I take the cross out. See, the cross talks about sin, the need. Why did Jesus go to the cross? Not because he was giving us a good example, because he went there because our sin. He had to pay for our sins. They say, take sin out of the equation. We don't want to be told we're a sinner. Stop saying the word sin. The word sin is like, wow. You just use it on social media and see where you go to. They want Christianity without sin. And Christianity has to become just about improving you. Improving you. You know how much God loved you? He crucified you. He put you to death on the cross in Jesus. That's how much he loves our flesh part. He loves us so much that he went to the cross. But we are our sin. Without that message, we become squeezed off the path. Combined to Greek words. Hupomeno. Pull, push. All it's just trying to get me off the path. Macrothermia means pressured just to let it explode. See, macrothermia means you don't leave the path, but you're just angry on it. I'm still on the path. Still doing what you told me to do, God. Yes, I went to church today. Yes, I had my prayer time. And I read 3 chapters of the Bible, but I'm not happy because I'm doing more than you're doing. Because I'm not off the path. But my whole attitude, I'm just letting what my life just tell me whatever it wants to say. I'm not bringing control. Macrothermia is patience that is an inward thing. This one is an outward pressure trying to squeeze me, but this one's coming from within. You've got to have both. And they've got to work with your faith. So how does faith work with both of these? How does faith take its contribution? Remember, it's the left wing. How does it take its contribution and make each of these work? I am going to leave that for another time. We're going to start the conversation, though, over the next 2 weeks. Because remember this started from Hebrews 10. Over the next week, we're going to look at Hebrews 11. And then the following week, Hebrews 12, which are all about how to mix faith with these things and some of the things we need to do in order to make that happen and how to make that work. So are you all good just with, I've got one thing to start with. Have you got the 2 pictures in mind? All right? I don't care what you call them. You can give them your own words. Challenge accepted, yeah. Words that make sense to other people and are not offensive. All right? But the word that says, I do not just let the frustrations of what I'm going through and the people and the difficulties and the pressures cause me to respond out of my own frustration. And neither do I let the pressures of what is on me, nor the pull of what could be beside me, get me off what I am called to do and where I am called to be. And you say, I'm going to mix that with my faith. We will talk about how that faith and these two things are mixed another time, but I'm going to start with the next 2 weeks. So we've got special with these meetings. Some of you'll be aware, we family and I, we're actually on leave for the next 2 weeks. But the church are going to pick this up and run with this. Next week, they're going to look at how Hebrews 11 builds this and strengthens our faith. And Hebrews 12 in the following week, how Jesus becomes an example of it for us. So we're going to look at those two things over the next 2 weeks. Really trust that you be a part of church, but don't just be a part of church. Be a grizzly at the church. All right? Don't bite someone and, bear with a sore head at church. No, not that type of. Come to church and be at church. Engage with those around, be a big support, and flow with them. So, but I want you, can you get those two concepts? They're the two things. Herbert the snail, that's not my patience. It's not letting it all just come out, and it's holding fast under pressure. Hallelujah. Thank you, Lord. Okay, well, let's stand. Maybe you can, you can send messages to us on social media, or if you're watching, or you can text them. Hey, what words or what phrases would you give for those two things? How would you describe them? What animals would you use to describe them? If a snail's no good, what do they represent? How can you put it in English that helps us to nail that? Thank you. So I appreciate that. So we're going to close the meeting